For my Hamlet Oral, I'll be analyzing the passage from Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 2, lines 327 through 362. Before my passage begins, Claudius and Laertes are planning to kill Hamlet in a duel. As Osric acts as a referee for their duel, Hamlet and Laertes both will get cut from the poisoned sword, and they're both going to die from the poison. As they fight in Ophelia's grave, Gertrude also ends up drinking some of the poison and ends up dying. So my passage is the passage where everyone dies, including King Claudius, Laertes, and Hamlet. Hamlet forces Claudius to drink the poison after Gertrude did, and he ends up dying. After this, Laertes forgives Hamlet for killing Polonius, saying that it wasn't his fault, and then also dies from the poison. Lastly, Hamlet dies, and with his dying wishes, he says goodbye to Horatio, convincing him not to kill himself, and then he asks Horatio to fix his reputation and tell everyone Hamlet's true story. He then declares that Fortinbras will be made the King of Denmark. And after Hamlet dies, after the scene, Fortinbras and the English ambassador arrive, and Horatio tells them Hamlet's dying wishes, and Fortinbras becomes the King of Denmark. The last action of the play is that Fortinbras sends Hamlet to have a soldier's treatment of burial as an honorable fallen soldier, and then the play ends. One important theme that this passage hits on is the theme of action versus inaction. Throughout the entire play, Hamlet takes a very passive approach to his goals, never really acting on his thoughts or emotions. However, after overcoming his fear of death previously and now facing it head on, Hamlet has changed a lot, becoming very proactive. This is seen as he's able to kill Laertes and Claudius, especially Claudius, which is something he was unable to do before. Shakespeare uses Hamlet's dialogue to call out both the people of Denmark and Hamlet himself, as Hamlet says that the bystanders that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mute or audience to this act, Act 5, Scene 2, lines 336 to 37, and after changing and becoming a man of action, Hamlet notices that all the people around him are passive and inactive, which is something that he himself was beforehand, and he calls them out on it. Shakespeare uses this irony that Hamlet himself was once a very passive person to highlight the theme and importance of being active about your issues. This is further reinforced by Hamlet's two foils, Laertes and Fortinbras. Laertes proves his proactiveness, attempting to exchange forgiveness, Act 5, Scene 2, lines 331, to Hamlet in regards to their father's death, in which he says that he does not think that either of their deaths are Hamlet's fault, and that that Claudius is the real villain. Hamlet also, and this shows how proactive Laertes is about his issues, something that Hamlet was not. And then Hamlet, finally acting on his thoughts and being proactive, recognizes how also motivated Fortinbras is, and he says that Fortinbras has Hamlet's dying voice, which is Act 5, Scene 2, lines 356, and that he should take over as king. Overall, this passage highlights the importance of taking action and not sitting idly as issues pile up. Another important detail of this passage is Hamlet's own resolutions. Not only does he kill Claudius and avenge his father, but he also resolves the dilemma of his to be or not to be soliloquy. Hamlet finally reaches the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, from Act 3, Scene 1, lines 80 to 81, only to discover that the rest is silence, Act 5, Scene 2, line 360. These are his final words, and his final words show how he has reached resolution regarding death and his philosophy on it, and he's perhaps found peace in it like he had hoped he would. Instead of seeing it as an exotic foreign place, he now sees only silence. And this relates to the theme of the human condition. Shakespeare uses these last words also as a double entendre, with Hamlet implying that after Horatio tells his story to Fortinbras, there is nothing more that Hamlet can do. Speaking of Fortinbras, Hamlet believes that he has made peace in Denmark by giving Fortinbras the throne. Since old King Hamlet had killed old Norway, Fortinbras getting Denmark resolves that issue, making peace for Hamlet and Fortinbras. This passage also makes many connections to other parts of the play. The most obvious connection in this passage is Hamlet pouring the poison in Claudius's ear to Claudius pouring the poison into the late King Hamlet's ear. Hamlet forces Claudius to drink off this potion in Act 5, Scene 2, line 328, just as Claudius poured a leprous distilment in the porches of King Hamlet's ear, lines 1, or Act 1, Scene 5, line 64 through 65. And Shakespeare uses this poetic justice and similarity between the two characters' deaths to drive the point across that Hamlet has finally gotten his revenge on Claudius. And it is ironic and also fitting that after Claudius thought that he could be so powerful, he ruled the whole kingdom, and he stole the throne for himself and the queen, that he suffers the same fate as his brother does. Moreover, Shakespeare kind of uses the poison as a device to kill and get rid of the entire royal family. King Hamlet, Claudius, Gertrude, and Hamlet, they all die from the poison. But the main point that is brought up here is that with this connection to Act 1 from Act 5, Shakespeare kind of completes a whole circle and comes full circle with this connection, showing that the main plot point of Hamlet trying to avenge his father has been completed and Claudius has been killed. Another connection is to the theme of suicide and is an example of the motif of death. When Hamlet is dying, he's talking to Horatio, and Horatio picks up the glass of poison, and he says that he is more than an antique Roman than a Dane. Act 5, Scene 2, line 343. And Horatio is saying that he wants to kill himself to die with Hamlet. He wants to have an honorable death. And Shakespeare is using a metaphor to compare Horatio to the Romans, who are known for being honorable soldiers and dying honorably. And because Horatio does not want to be a damned Dane, Act 5, Scene 2, line 328, as Hamlet describes King Claudius, who was very corrupt and treacherous and not loyal to Hamlet or to the crown, because Horatio wants to show how important Hamlet and his friendship is, and this goes along with the theme of loyalty and the theme of friendship, of how much Horatio will go, what means Horatio will go to serve Hamlet. And although he doesn't kill himself, he thinks about it, and this relates to Ophelia's suicide, which Gertrude explains that she chanted snatches of old lauds as one incapable of her own distress. In Act 4, Scene 7, lines 178 through 179. While it's somewhat ambiguous whether or not Ophelia did kill herself, Gertrude makes it pretty clear that in her eyes, and many other eyes around her, that Ophelia did in fact kill herself. Suicide was seen as a really big sin in Shakespeare's time, and especially throughout this play, when we look at Ophelia and how she was buried and how everyone around her views her after she kills herself. And that shows us how good of a friend Horatio is to Hamlet in this passage. That Horatio was willing to commit such a sin, and he was willing to have everyone around him look down on him in the same way they looked at Ophelia, just to show his loyalty and friendship to Hamlet and how much he cared about him and that he didn't want Hamlet to be alone. Horatio shows his loyalty to Hamlet all the way to the end. He wishes him a good night, sweet prince, and that flights of angels sing him to his rest. Act 5, Scene 2, line 361 to 62. Horatio knows that he will see Hamlet again in heaven and supports him all the way through his death and afterwards by telling his story. Horatio is really an embodiment of the theme of friendship and loyalty. Overall, this passage was very important to the story because it wraps up everything along with killing all the characters, and it goes over some key resolutions of the main plot points of the story.